The purpose of this video is going to be to show you how to set up a new quadcopter model in your EdgeTX remote control and then bind it to your quadcopter. And finally, how to set up your transmitter and channel switches inside Betaflight so that your radio transmitter and your quadcopter will do exactly what you want them to do. There are lots of different EdgeTX radio models out there, and so I'm not going to show you the buttons on here because the layout of the buttons on your radio will probably be different. But what you're going to need to do is simply follow along and do these steps as you would need to using the appropriate buttons on your particular controller. So to start out, what we need to do is we need to go into the menu for making a new model. Now on my radio, I just long press the model key. And we can see that we have a list of all of the models that are currently on this radio. And up in the top right corner on mine is the place where we can put a new model. And so I'm going to roll over there and you can see how it highlights in blue. We'll just click on there and we'll get up the new model wizard. The best and easiest thing to do to set up a freestyle quadcopter is just to make a blank model. So that's what we're going to do. We'll just come here and click and choose blank model. And just like that, we've got a new blank model. Now what we need to do is go in and actually configure that model the way we need it to be and to set up a few small details. So we're going to go back in here. I'm just going to get back into the model setup page. Now for me, I just have to short press the model button on my radio, but however you get back to the model setup page with your particular radio, that's what you'll need to do. And on this first page that's labeled model setup, there are a few things that we need to do. The first one is, if you'd like, you can actually give this a proper name. Now I don't have a touch screen on my particular radio, so I have to do this manually. And so I'm just going to erase all of this model. And what will we call it? Just for argument, I'll just go ASDF. Now this is just for simplicity. Give it a name that's meaningful to you. And then we'll just skip through and make sure you do the check mark at the bottom to accept it. And that will name your model. The other thing we need to do on the model setup page is to come down, and in the bottom here, we can see that there's an internal RF module and an external RF module. Now I'm going to be using the external RF module because I have an external an external ELRS pack. And so that's what I'm going to use. But if you're using something that's built into your radio, you would choose the internal and choose the appropriate protocol. So I want to use the external one. Click external. And it's currently off, so I need to turn it to the particular protocol that I'm going to be using. And because I'm using Express ELRS, it's Crossfire. So I will select that. And the other items are all set up properly how I need them. And so I can just back out of here. And so now I've got the radio control set up to be able to communicate. The next thing we need to do is just to move down these tabs here at the top a little bit. We've got the one here called Heli, we can skip. The flight modes, we can skip. The inputs, what we want to see here, and it's because we did a blank model, it should be this way automatically. But what we want to be able to see here is that they're listed as AETR, aileron, elevator, throttle, and rudder, in that order. And there should only be 4, and those represent the 4 directions of the sticks that we can move to control the quadcopter. And those are our main inputs and the only ones that we need for a quadcopter. So as long as those are correct, then you are good to go. If they aren't, you're going to need to reorder them or change them. Okay. If you need to change them, you just simply click on one, click on it, and then you would choose edit, or delete, or whatever you need to do in order to make the changes. This one here, because we chose to do it the blank model way, it's going to be set up as we need it. So it's pretty slick that way. What we need to do next is tell EdgeTX which of these switches we are actually going to use when we are flying, and set them up so that EdgeTX knows when they have been activated. First of all, you kind of need to know which switches you like to use and what their purpose is going to be. So for me, on my other radio, I typically like to use a switch that's got 2 positions for arming. I like to use a switch like this one here on this radio, which is a temporary switch that goes on and off automatically as a pre-arm and as a beeper switch. And then I like to use one more switch only as a switch for changing flight modes. And because that particular quadcopter that I'm setting up is going to have a GPS, I want a switch for the return to home. And so the 3-position switch will allow me to do that. And so for my setup on here, I'm going to need to set up 3 different switches that EdgeTX will know to be active and to monitor them for input from us. What we need to do is just scroll through these, and you can see the mixes. They already include the 4 AETR. They're already there. And what we need to do is to go down below them, where the plus sign is, just add another mix. What we're going to be adding here are what are called aux channels or auxiliary channels. The first 4 are considered the main essential critical channels. Any ones after the first 4 are considered auxiliary. And they're the switches that they're the things that we can set up to use with switches and spinny tabs and whatever else that we might want. However, because this is a freestyle quadcopter, we don't need very many. So what we'll do is we're going to come down here. We'll click add a new one. Now with Express ELRS, they have a very special rule that says you must use channel 5 for arming. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take channel 5, which is auxiliary number 1. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to set it up as what I need it to be. So what I'll do is I'll just tab in here and I'll give it a name. And I said I'd like it to be called ARM. So I'll just come here and AM, select that. Thank you very much. And then we come down here and we'll select this next one called source. And source is going to be the switch that we want to use for this particular action, which is arming the quadcopter. So I have the switch that I like. For me, on mine, it's this bottom left switch. That's just what I like. Choose the one that's appropriate for you. But the way you do that is you select this, and it will show you a full list of all of them. So you could scroll through and try to find which one, or you just activate and flick the switch that you want it to be, and it will automatically select it. On my radio, that turns out to be switch F. I accept that. And now this particular switch is set up like we need it. And I'll move back. And so if we see here on the list, there's now a new channel, number 5. It's connected to switch F, and we've called it the ARM switch. I need to do 2 more, so I'll just show you one more here quickly, and then I think you'll understand the basic process. So we'll add a channel. I'm just going to continue straight down, next number. So number 6, auxiliary channel number 6. I'm going to call this one here, I'm going to call it the beeper. And I use that switch for 2 things. I use that switch for pre-arming purpose and also for just firing off the lost model beeper. And again, I need to set the switch for it. So I'll just highlight the source place, select it to activate it, and then choose the switch just by activating or flicking it to say the one that you want. And there it is. It's in there. We just need to return and back out of this, and you can see the next one. Since I only have 1 more to go, we'll just do it one more time. It's pretty straightforward. Whoops, too far. We'll add next channel, and on this one I'd like to call it just modes. And the one that I like to use for this is switch C, which has 3 positions. I will select it, and we're done. Beyond that, the other settings that we can see across the top here, at this time, we don't need to worry about any of them. We've basically got our quadcopter set up inside of EdgeTX the basic way that we need it. And so from here, we're able to go into Betaflight and then connect or bind our radio with the quadcopter and then set up all of the switches and modes that we want to be able to activate in Betaflight now that we have the switches all set up. Once you have your radio set up, we're going to come back into Betaflight, connect the quad that we're going to set up with this new model, and go through the steps of setting up the model. And here we are in Betaflight. The place that we need to head for is down here at the receiver tab in Betaflight. So we'll head there. And what we will need to do is, one, make sure that our receiver and transmitter are bound. Now, I'm using Express ELRS, and my receivers and transmitter have their binding phrase already in there, and so it binds automatically. And that's just a really wonderful thing about Express ELRS. Now, this is not going to be a tutorial on how to bind your quad to your radio. I don't know what radio protocol you use, what kind of radio and transmitters you are using. Basically, the process you'll follow is whatever you need to do for your particular receiver. In Betaflight, there is down in the bottom right corner, the place where you can click and bind receiver, and that sends a command to the receiver to enter into binding mode, which is a nice thing to do because if you just have a button on your radio to push, that can make it happen quite easily. If you know that everything is connected, but nothing seems to be happening, make sure that you have checked the correct receiver mode that you're using. So in my case, I know it's a serial receiver, it's Express ELRS, and make sure that you're using the correct protocol. Now, Express ELRS uses Crossfire as its transmission protocol, and so that's what I've selected. Now, you need to make sure that that's correct for whatever you are using in your particular quad and make those selections. Go down to the bottom corner here where it says save, save them, and see if that makes the difference that you needed. There are a few other things that we need to check on this page, and it depends a little bit on the hardware that you're using. The first one, and it is most important, is just make sure here that your channel map says AETR 123. That is the default channel mapping to match the settings that are in your radio. If that isn't correct, make sure you come here and choose the ones that you can choose from. I'm using Express ELRS. Express ELRS has telemetry built into it. So to do that, I need to make sure that the telemetry is turned on, and I need to make sure that the RSSI ADC is turned off, and that the RSSI channel is turned off. Now that's how you set it up for Express ELRS. If you have different hardware, you will need to set that up as is specific to your hardware. Once you have done that, we can come down here and click Save. And as long as we can see that when we move our sticks and switches, we can see that they are working. So the switch that I set up inside EdgeTX previously to be my arming switch, if I turn it, it should be aux number 1, and we can see that that is exactly what's happening. And the one that I said I'd like to use for beeper, it was on aux number 2, and we can see that it's active. And the switch that I said I would like to use for modes is working. And so from this, I can tell that all of my switches and things are doing what I expect them to do. They're sending the correct command from my transmitter out to the quad, and it's being received and doing what it should. Now what we need to do is actually set up and tell Betaflight what we want to happen when we flick one of those switches. Because right now it's just a switch that goes on and off, and Betaflight doesn't know what to do when we flick that switch. So what we do then is we come here to the Modes tab, which we come into. What we can see is a long list of available modes and things that we can do by flicking a switch. It says here that they're called modes. Not everything in here is a mode. Something is just to be able to activate a black box, for example, or to start up a beeper. So we'll go through some of these. Once you understand how to do it, you'll be able to set up whichever ones that you feel you need. So the first one that I have is the arm. So we're going to add a range for that. Just click add range. And if you look right here, it says auto. And that means that when I flick a switch, it will automatically recognize which one I have switched or I have moved and fill in the data. So I'm going to do that. And so I flick the switch and you can see that automatically it says here's aux 1 and it took my channel. And we can see now that there's this orange line marker that switches from the low part all the way up to the high part. Now what we have to do is we have to set the place that tells it it's going to be active. Express LRS, you should have it set up so that it's on, the arming is on auxiliary channel number 1, and it should be at the high position to arm. And so what you'll do is you will take this slider and just move it up to that range. And what you can see then is that the way this will work is as long as this little orange marker is inside this orange slider, it is active. And if you unswitch it, it becomes inactive. So just to show that, I'll hit save on here. And if you come here, you can see I switched it to active, and you can see that right away it lit up and saying, yes, this is on, it's trying to arm, but it can't because there are some things that are stopping it from doing that, which is good because it's on the desk. So now we can actually arm our quad. I like to always have a pre-arm on my quads and a beeper as well. And so we can come down here, we just see what other ones are available. Heads free, fail safe, GPS rescue. We'll come back to that one in a minute. And then we come down here. Oh, here's the one that's the beeper. So I'm going to add a range for the beeper. Again, you can see here that it's on auto. And if I move it up, it switches position. And I will just take the slider and move it up so that when it's there, the beeper will activate. On that same switch, I like to have a pre-arm switch, and that's a little bit further down this list. Let's see here, right here, pre-arm. And so I'm going to add a range, and it's the same switch, and we can do that. So here's the same switch, and I'm actually going to even put it in the same position so that when the switch is on high, that activates the pre-arm. Now, the reason you do this is that if you only have an arm switch, if you're walking around or you bump your the transmitter in your hand and you bump the switch, your quad will arm instantly. If you have the pre-arm set, what it means is you need to turn one switch first, hold it there, and then arm and release the first fit switch. And what that does is adds a level of safety to the whole arming process. And it's just something that I really like to do. You can make your own choice. I think it's a pretty smart idea. So we're going to save those ones. We also need here to have the turtle mode. So if you're upside down and you don't want to go for a walk, you can make your quad flip over. I'm going to add a range. And the switch I want for that is this 3-position switch that I'd set up before. I'm not showing you how I switch these.
Common mistake, sir.
So here's the 3-position switch that I had chosen previously inside of EdgeTX that I wanted to be for the modes. I like to have the flip over crash right in the middle. One more thing that I'm going to put on here, and this is only because it's going to have GPS rescue available to it. So I'm going to come up, and right here is the GPS rescue. And so I will add a range for that. And if we go back to that other screen, we can see that it should be this switch here. What I will do is put this in the upper range. The way this will work is that when this switch is in the very bottom range, nothing is active. It's just flying in plain ordinary acro mode. If I have an unexpected landing and I need to go into turtle mode, flip it one time, and then I can do the turtle mode. And then if I need to, for whatever reason, go into a GPS rescue, I can just flick the switch one more time and it will activate the GPS rescue. Coming back here into Betaflight, what I'm going to do right now is just click the thing that says hide unused modes. And that just gets rid of all of the ones that we aren't using so that we can see the ones that we are using more easily. So we can see here that I've got an arm set up, GPS rescue, a beeper, a flip over crash or turtle mode, and the pre-arm for safety. This is how I set up basically all of my Freestyle quads, except for the ones that don't have GPS. I would leave the GPS rescue out. You don't need a lot of extra switches and modes and changes when you're flying a Freestyle quad. You may choose to add a few more that are appropriate for your particular wishes and needs and flying style. But this is the basic process for being able to connect your radio to your quad and set up all of the modes and switches that you need in order to be able to fly. Thank you very much for watching. If you did find it helpful, maybe take a second here and hit the subscribe button. Until the next time, have a great day and safe flying. Take care.